Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our final Directory for Catechesis webinar. Today, we're focusing on part 3, Catechesis in the particular churches, which invites us to reflect on our ministry in our own particular context. We're still coming to you from the CCCB offices in Ottawa, but we've relocated rooms for logistical reasons. This afternoon, we once again are very grateful to have His Excellency, the Most Reverend Douglas Crosby, Bishop of Hamilton, with us. Today, he's going to lead us again in prayer and bring greetings. Please welcome Bishop Crosby.
So I'm very happy to be with you again this week. And again, I congratulate the Office for Evangelization and Catechesis for this initiative, and it's a very interesting process, and really introducing ourselves to the Directory for Catechesis. Apparently, some of the participants were asking about the bishops, the names of the bishops who have been participating in this over the past few weeks. I'm just going to read out a few of the names, or the names that I've gathered here. Archbishop Brian Dunn, who is the coadjutor bishop for Halifax, and the liaison bishop for the Atlantic Catechetical Association, is one of the bishops. Bishop Bart Van Rooyen, the new bishop of Corner Brook and Labrador, and a member of the Episcopal Commission for Evangelization and Catechesis. Bishop Joseph Dabrowski, the auxiliary bishop of London, of London, and a member also of the Episcopal Commission for Evangelization and Catechesis. And he's the only returning member, so he's the one with all the experience that we'll be counting on. Bishop Wayne Kirkpatrick, who is the new bishop of Antigonish. Bishop Gary Gordon, who is the old bishop of Victoria, Diocese of Victoria, way out there in the west. And Bishop Albert Thévenot, the Bishop of Prince Albert, and a past member of the Episcopal Commission for Evangelization of Catechesis. Now, there may be other bishops on today. I don't have their names, but welcome to you, and welcome to all of you to this very interesting webinar. I'm going to pray again the prayer of St. Francis. If you know it, pray it with me. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, in pardoning that we are pardoned, and in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. So good luck. Have a great session. I look forward to hearing the speakers.
Thank you very much, Bishop Crosby, for your time, for joining us for all of these sessions. We're very grateful to you for that. And we're also very grateful for the support that you're offering us for our work. Thank you. So once again, our faithful committee members are with us. Sister Angela Marie Castellani, Dr. Ann Walsh. Actually, she's going to join us a little bit later. Mrs. Michelle Dabrowski, Dr. Ann Jameson, and today Mr. David Daler, whom you met last week and prior to that, will be our moderator and will facilitate questions and answers. Our speakers today have made invaluable contributions to the work of the committee over these past months. Sister Angela Marie Castellani, FSE, came highly recommended to us from the Archdiocese of Vancouver. She has freely shared her many gifts with us and has become a friend to all. Sister Angela Marie is a Franciscan sister of the Eucharist, A native of Italy, she earned a judicial degree and a master in law professions from the University of Perugia, Italy, and then became a lawyer. After joining the Franciscan Sisters of the Eucharist in Meriden, Connecticut in the US, Sister Angela Marie earned a master's degree in theology and taught high school scriptures, church history, and theology, and morality, and worked for the pro-life office of the Archdiocese of Hartford, Connecticut. She's been serving in the Archdiocese of Vancouver since 2015, first as an instructor of theology and ethics and a campus minister at Corpus Christi and St. Mark's College, and most recently as the coordinator for adult faith formation and catechesis for the Archdiocese of Vancouver. And joining Sister today is Michelle Dabrowski. Michelle joined the Office for Evangelization and Catechesis on September 8th of this year, and she has not stopped since her arrival. She and I are developing a rich and wonderful collaborative working relationship, and she has become a friend to all of us. Michelle was born and raised in Stratford, Ontario, and she migrated to pursue university studies in Ottawa and has since settled here. She's a PhD candidate at the Dominican University College, whose thesis is researching in the field of moral theology with a focus on bioethics and palliative care. She completed her undergraduate, graduate, and master's degree programs in theology at the same university. She's been involved with parish ministry, such as building marriage preparation programs, and she has served on the Parish Pastoral Council. At the diocesan level, she served on the vocations committee for the French sector and spoke to high school students on finding faith and meaning in their lives. For a number of years, she's participated on the Anglican Roman Catholic Dialogue of Canada as secretary for the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops, as well as attended other ecumenical and interfaith events hosted by the CCCB as a theological graduate student. Since she and her Franco-Ontarian husband celebrated 7 years of marriage this October and welcomed their first child in February. Michelle loves all things chocolate and reserves Saturday mornings for English Premier League soccer, which I understand Sister Angela is also very interested in. Please welcome Michelle Dabrowski and Sister Angela Marie Castellani.
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. And thank you, Michelle, for being on the same team.
Happy to be here. Perfect. So, welcome everyone to our last and final session today. What a journey it's been, this whole experience of leading webinars and being kind of behind the scenes. And here we are at our final session and for part 3. And I hope you found the previous sessions as informative as I have. Being new to the Office for Evangelization and Catechesis in this area of our church in general, I feel what an exciting time we're in. And I really valued walking through part 1 with Ann Walsh and growing in a deeper understanding of that relationship between evangelization and catechesis, and also that important emphasis of forming the catechist. So part 1, what a great overview. And then part 2 with Ann Jameson and David Daler, we had a great unpacking of really looking at our content, but method, our methodology. What are some ways that we can think and rethink our methodology today? And so now we arrive in this final section, and you'll notice it's part 3, catechesis in the particular churches. And so this is going to be the opportunity for each of us in our settings and where we find ourselves. Okay, in my concrete place, how do I bring these really vast topics of part 1 and part 2 to my particular setting? And so you'll notice whenever you get your copy of the directory, or if you have it now, that part 3 is extremely extensive. There's so much content, different ins and outs. And so today we're going to provide a bird's eye view and kind of focus in on some areas that we thought would be interesting for all of you today. So let's just take a quick look at how it's divided. So we have 4 chapters in this part 3. And it's the first one, which I'll spend some time with you today, is the Christian community as participant in catechesis. And I found this really exciting. We've talked a lot about, okay, those part 1, part 2 topics, and how are we going to do this now as a community in our Christian communities? So that's the focus of chapter 9. And then chapter 10 is kind of that chapter everyone was waiting for. It's that juicy chapter where we look at the digital culture and other essential concerns that we have for catechesis today. And so Sister Angela Marie is going to be the one unpacking that, and I'll kind of come in at the end on some of those sections. And then we have the 2 final chapters, chapter 11, catechesis at the service of the inculturation of the faith, and chapter 12, the organisms at the service of catechesis. Right, so when I first read part 3 and its chapters, what I visualized was tapestry. I'm a very visual person, and that's the image that came to my mind. In our particular churches, our communities, dioceses, parishes, movements, groups, schools, places, I was brought to contemplate how all of these unique strands of our various settings weave together, how they hold together in the same mission of evangelization and catechesis. And we hear that the church exists in order to evangelize, but it does this concretely in our particular churches. So that's the focus of part 3. How are we doing this in our particular places? So each of our communities and places make up strands of beautiful colors, charisms, and designs. And part 3 isolates or zooms in on where we intersect. It identifies what we're doing well, and directly communicates to us that if we wish to keep our brilliant colors, there is an urgent need to reform and rethink all pastoral ministry in the vein of evangelization. So it's this idea that we are unique wherever we are planted and rooted, but intrinsically connected as one. And what we do in the particular influences the whole. So I really liked what the previous presenters have done. Where what's new in this part of the directory, and that's been helpful for me, someone who wasn't super familiar with previous directories, and to sort of think, okay, well, what are we growing, and what's new? So in chapter 9. What we see new in terms of a directory, not new in terms of church teaching or new in the life of the church, but what's identified specifically is there's a part on the role of the Eastern churches and their role in catechesis. So we'll look at that today, as well as the other parts of chapter 9. And what else is new in chapter 10 is what I mentioned before, the digital culture, some questions on bioethics and environmental engagement. So these are some of the new things since the last directory that we see now present for us. So let's take a look at that chapter 9. And I really enjoyed this chapter. It's also got lots for us to read and unpack. And I think it's where we get to reflect in our own Christian community, in my own community, how do we participate in catechesis? So if you're involved in parish ministry, there's a spot, parishes. Let's go there and let's unpack that further. If you're involved in an association, movement, or group, there's a spot for you there. If you're involved in Catholic schools and the teaching of the Catholic religion in schools, there's lots of parts. So we're going to go through just broad strokes over them. But of course, go and spend some time there in your own concrete setting. So what I found beautiful about the start of this chapter is that it begins with a section on the church and the ministry of God's word. And I think it's a section that orients all of our various communities as having the same starting point, the ministry of God's word. And in this part, in the text here, we see those same themes and words that resonate throughout the directory coming previous, such as how the word forms us in the art of listening, and because only those who listen can also proclaim. And we read how the word is dynamic, how it grows and spreads on its own. It speaks to its mysterious freedom. And so the document reminds us that a person who accepts the gospel as the word of God normally translates that into the following sacramental acts. And so we hear that there is an indispensable link between word and sacrament. And of course, it reaches its greatest efficacy in the liturgy, in the Eucharist. And so again, starting from the same starting point altogether, the ministry of God's word, and we come together just as for evangelization, so too catechesis is an action for which the whole church feels responsible. So this is our starting point, and then we go off and look at our particular places. So some of the things that we see in this first section is that, again, we see it reiterated. It's the responsibility that concerns everyone. Catechesis is a responsibility that concerns everyone. All of the people of the church are called to be active agents and responsible for evangelization, no matter what their role. It's not just about being a select few or the select few experts, but we're all called to be missionary disciples. And one part I found really fascinating, it's the last chapter, the last section, the last paragraph of this part is 289. And it says, one concrete form of evangelization is synodal practice. Now, how often have, I've asked, well, what's concretely, what does evangelization look like? Well, this directory points to a few concrete ways of how we can do that. And so it speaks about synodal practice that's realized at the universal and local level, and it's expressed in the different synods or councils. So we're hearing synod used a lot lately, and it's of course it's been a part of our church tradition since the very beginning. And so today it calls us to this renewed awareness of the missionary identity, and it requires a greater capacity for sharing, communication, and encounter, so that we can journey together as part of the church and what we'll call a docility to the Spirit. So the directory concludes this part by saying that the ministry of the word, our starting place, is realized concretely in the context of the different ecclesial traditions and particular churches in their various branches. So directly following, we see this part on a couple paragraphs on the Eastern churches. So I know this for our Canadian landscape, this is so important. We have communities of the different Eastern rites across the country. So it speaks to and affirms and encourages the Eastern churches spread throughout the world to protect and transmit the faith in their own ecclesial traditions, maintaining the liturgy, patrology, hagiography, iconography, all of these rich, beautiful traditions that catechesis for these areas should really be the focus. And what I love too, there's just a last part, is as it is reiterated that in the East, also it is recommended in the Western Church today that catechesis cannot be separated from the liturgy. So here we see a true sharing of gifts between the Eastern and Western Church. Now, the next section is the particular churches. And so it speaks about, just like the universal church, so too is each particular church a participant in evangelization. So really, the particular church is where we enter into contact with a community. We listen to the word of God. We become Christians through baptism and gather for the Eucharist assembly that, presided over by the bishop, is the main manifestation of the church. So I love the quote I pulled for you on the slide here. I love this quote. By living in a specific place The particular churches evangelize by rooting themselves in the history, the culture, the traditions, the languages, and the problems of the people. And it calls out to us, each particular church is called to carry out catechesis as best it can. That's what it says. So encouraging. As best that we can, we're called to live that out. Right, so in the last paragraph of the particular churches in 297, it will say that we are bringing into question our traditional forms of initiation and education in the faith. But it finishes on an encouraging note that some particular and local churches have already begun a process of review and renewal in pastoral care. And it strongly states that there is a pressing need to frame everything in terms of evangelization. So everything that's come before in these sessions on thinking about catechesis and its dynamic bond with evangelization, growing our understanding of doing catechesis inside the catechumenal vein, rethinking the formation of catechists, rethinking our methodology. This last note I find encouraging, that the directory affirms it's already taking place and affirms for us to keep going, keep discerning, keep trying new things, keep the energy of what can sometimes, and I think most times, be very demanding, uncomfortable, challenging. And I think the directory is hoping to orient us together to encourage and guide the discernment taking place inside our communities. And when I was thinking kind of concretely, what would this mean for me in my life, I was brought to remember a particular example of how this process is actually, it is quite difficult. I think realistically, when we try and implement it, it's going to be a bit tough. And I was brought back to remember that my husband and I, we were involved in a new parish. There was a new priest who was assigned. There was another couple, and we all wanted to sort of rethink our marriage preparation courses. You know, here we had people, young couples coming to the church that don't come to Mass on Sunday, or they're not really involved in life with the community, but they wanted to get married in the church. So great, Evangelii Gaudium was just released, so we wanted to reformulate the whole marriage preparation course in terms of that first announcement of the gospel, meeting them where they are in terms of accompaniment, really trying to create a climate like this. But of course, there's somebody who's already been doing that preparation, and in this case for over 20 years. They were personally invested. They had spent their time, their energy, and had really beautiful experiences doing that. And so when we come all gung-ho to sort of revamp everything, there is some important collaboration that needs to take place, listening and working together, and trying to be a true community where we do collaborate and respect one another. So let's go into the parish. So the next section moves into what we know, the parish. And it really affirms a lot about the parish. It affirms that it's, yes, a Eucharistic community united with the bonds of charity. It can be a network of services, ministries, and charisms. It brings together the many human differences and merges them together into the universality of the church. Without preferences of persons, how beautiful is that? It's a place where there is no preference of persons. And it speaks about that it's not an outdated institution as long as we go through this process of renewal. And it looks at how the parish possesses a great flexibility. Depending on the charisms of the community and the charisms of the pastor, they really can be quite flexible. But what it does look at, and it points to a caution, that the parish cannot neglect our present day difficulties. And it calls out to us a process of missionary conversion must be begun that is not limited to maintain the status quo of guaranteeing the administration of the sacraments, but presses forward on the direction of evangelization. It calls the parish to renew the relational dynamics, making their structures open and less bureaucratic. That's quite concrete language. but sometimes we know difficult to implement practically. And there's a call for the parish to enter into self-renewal and constant adaptivity. So again, we see how there is still an encouraging note that the directory speaks to on this. So it says that there are already new forms of organizations within the diocese that we can call pastoral units. And they have the aim of implementing evangelization with an organic and comprehensive pastoral approach in an innovative and creative way. So again, affirming what's already taking place. And it will say that the parish is still the privileged place of education in the faith, while being aware that is not the center of gravity for all catechetical functions. And it will affirm that there are other ecclesial pathways that are not strictly connected to the existing structures. And then it finishes on this note that the need for a renewed impulse of evangelization justifies the decision to rethink in a missionary vein all the pastoral activity of the Christian community, even the most ordinary and traditional ones. And then this will be interesting if you're in parish ministry, you're in diocesan ministry and looking at the role of the parish, go to this part of these different aspects to consider to help us rethink how we are going to be communities of missionary disciples, engaging in missionary mentality, and offering formative programs inspired by the catechumenate. So I would want to ask a question now, and David Daler, if you would come on, and I'm curious to know if your diocese or your parish or your ministry setting has already started a process to renew the pastoral activity in a missionary vein. And if so, what have you focused on? So I'd like to know across the country, in your own places, what are some of the things that you're already doing to renew your pastoral activities into line with evangelization? So we'll leave a moment there, and you can use your question and answer box. And maybe you haven't begun anything, and that's okay too. Maybe there's an area that you'd like to say, let's start here. How can we concretely start somewhere? Because sometimes if you see the whole, it becomes overwhelming. So I'm curious to know what are the different angles or ways that we're starting that process?
They're starting to come in. Oh, here we come. Alpha is one way. Focus on initial evangelization of adults, building up leadership cultures, build up leaders. A stewardship program. Our parish is working on that. Developing and reshaping our RCIA program. No, we are ailing in analysis paralysis. That's a good point.
Yes, very good point.
Sunday Mass on YouTube. Yes, Episcopal Vicar presented an outline of pastoral conversion of the parish, that new document that came out at regional deanery meetings of the clergy and lay parish staff. Looking at regions, how they can be supportive of one another. Outreach to immigrants. Again, Alpha. Synodality, synod implementation. Focus on family catechesis, ministries, families. Focus on adult formation, especially parenting and with other catechists, focusing on small communities for encouraging belonging and connection. Exploring Sherry Wendell's process of forming intentional disciples. Moving our catechesis from first reconciliation into a family-based program, emphasizing families. A greater emphasis, and we'll talk about this later, a greater use of technology and digital culture.
Yeah, beautiful.
Well, they keep coming, Michelle. Family catechism.
That's great.
New evangelization, Facebook private family groups, more on leadership development.
That's awesome.
And lay formation. How's that for a start?
That's great. Wow. So I knew it. I knew there had to be lots going on already. And that's really an encouraging sign that hopefully we're getting on board all together, but there's so much already started and we're on our way. So thank you for sharing what you're doing in each of your particular places. So I thought we'd just take a quick look here. We're going to move from the parish now into some of the other particular places. And the next one is associations, movements, and groups of the faithful. And now it's kind of the interplay between all of our particular places. And that's important. We have to remember not to be silos. Yes, we have a focus and where where we're involved in a community. But there's also this sort of need to keep connected to all of our members across a region where we would be really under the bishop as first catechist in our area, and to collaborate. And so we move into this next part on associations, movements, and groups of the faithful. And it begins, the first paragraph, it begins by saying, recognizing the importance of parishes does not mean that ecclesial experiences is confined to them. So these aggregates, they really experienced a new blossom after the Second Vatican Council. And they're a reality in the church that show a great capacity for evangelization, reaching into environments that often are distant from the traditional structures. I think that's a key point, that sometimes these groups and movements reach into those places outside of our parish walls or our traditional structures and find places or environments that are kind of new and needing the gospel. And so it speaks about how, yes, these different association movements and groups of the faithful, they often look very different from one another, but there are some common elements that we can see, and some strengths. And so it affirms this rediscovery of the community dimension, a reinforcement of aspects of Christian life, like listening to the word, the practice of piety and charity, the promotion of the laity and the mission of the church and society. And then it also looks at some difficulties that can arise in these association movements and groups of the faithful. And it speaks about a danger of exclusivity, an excessive sense of identification, an insufficient incorporation into particular churches. And so it really calls these associations, groups, and movements to be attuned to the diocesan pastoral plan. And the parish is called to appreciate the catechesis that takes place in these aggregations, particularly because they reach beyond the boundaries. And I'll have a quick note here also on Catholic schools and the teaching of the Catholic religion. So if you're a religious educator, I know there are a number of you on our webinar series. This will be great for you to go and spend some time. And just to pull out a couple of the beautiful points, and this part speaks to how, a great advancement is how we transitioned from thinking the school as an institution to seeing the school as a community of faith, and a place of real and specific pastoral ministry. And it speaks about its relation to catechesis as being, was one of distinction and complementarity. Perfect. So that is my first part. And so I'm going to invite Sister Angela Marie to come on with her camera, and she will then lead us with chapter 10.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, everyone. So as Michelle mentioned, I will follow with chapter 10 that addresses the catechesis in situation of pluralism and complexity, and then speaking a little bit about science and the media and technology. So I will share my PowerPoint in just a second. Okay, so catechesis in the face of the contemporary culture. So we really do know that we live in realities that are extremely complexes. And I'm sorry, I'm taking a second to move my slide. Okay, so in reality, they are very, very complex. We live in a world that has been shaped by globalization and by the use of the mass media that have increased the connections among people and among nations here I am, a Franciscan sister of the Eucharist. I was born and raised in Italy. I was born in 1975, and I think my parents, the last thought that they had, one, that I was entering religious life, but the second is that I would enter from Assisi, the land of St. Francis, that I would enter a Franciscan community in Meriden, Connecticut, and that I will end up in Canada, British Columbia, Vancouver, some years later. So our world brings us very quickly to the other side of the world and brings us to encounter people of other cultures. We live in a world that is extremely materialistic and individualistic. And as I said, globalization and mass media have influenced the world tremendously. So catechesis needs absolutely to consider and to be inserted into this social and cultural dimension. And also we need to continue to read what we so-called the sign of the times, to make sure that we look around ourselves, and the church especially has the obligation to consider the progresses and the cultural tendencies. Acting at a religious identity, all the new social questions generating many fluctuating concrete situations need to be taken in consideration. So as I said, it is important that the church, which has its purpose to bring the beauty of the faith to everyone in the world and to each and every person, be aware of this complexity and how to go about it. Michelle has spoken quite extensively about the synodal perspective, and I think that is the way that we need to go about in terms of methodology that is consistent with the journey that the community is called to make. The Directory for Catechesis tells us that the service to humanity is really the ultimate reason why the church looks at human culture, and especially in an attitude of listening and dialogue. Again, we spoke a lot about the fact that we need to be able to listen to each other in a spirit of accompaniment, examine everything while holding on to what is good. We may give a quick look to the situation of our culture today and extrapolate just a lot of negative elements, but we really need to hang on to what is good. The church aims at formulating an understanding of the charisma best adapted to the various mentality, so that the process of catechesis may truly be enculturated in the situations that we find ourselves in, and so that the gospel can truly illuminate the lives of all, our own and the lives of the people whom we serve. So in these situations then, evaluations must also take account of human spaces. Where are we? Where are we evangelizing? And so at this point, we're going to look briefly at two situations: the urban context and then the countryside. So Canada is a beautiful country. I've been blessed to be here for the past 5 years, and I definitely have been exposed to the great cities like Vancouver. Growing up in a small countryside town, Vancouver was overwhelming for me at the beginning. Think about a cultural shock. That's what I had. I've never lived in a city for a long time. I had experienced cities in my travels, but not lived in one. And so situations are different according where we live, and so are for our people. This is a fascinating quote from the new directory, which I think we all can take in and meditate upon. It says the reality of the city and of any environment, if I can say, influences the human being's understanding of himself, of the relationships that he lives, and of the very meaning of life. So where we live influences really who we are and who we become. So I will start with a question for you, and maybe before we even start talking about the urban context, I'm not sure what part of Canada you are, but what do you think are the challenges of proclaiming the gospel in large cities and metropolitan environments?
Oh, the pace of life, the lack of connection, gathering people, everyone is too busy, the atmosphere of anonymity, isolation, Oh, I like these cultural diversities,
Yeah.
diversities, languages, needs, individualism, the secular culture and the draw towards it, the pushback from secular culture, secularism, lots of people commenting on that, social mobility, turnover in parishes and parishioners, other competing offers for entertainment, social life, too many distractions, a lack of knowledge of the basic faith, no common language, the noise from outside influences, lack of cooperation between groups, time dispersed among families, Christianity is not understood about Catholic faith. We forget in the large cities, we tend to forget the poor, the alienated, the voiceless. Finding space and a sense of belonging, isolation. Isolation is coming up a number of times.
Wow.
Multiculturalism, COVID, lack of trust, diversity, over and over again. Again, and people keep referring to a competition for time and attention. Many storefront faith communities which seem to be more welcoming than we are.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, David. Those are beautiful answers, so real. And I think about time. I feel that too in my own life. And I have a beautiful, disciplined and structured life. But time is big. And so many of the situations that we see in our in our cities, leaving behind the most in need and the vulnerable. So absolutely, you had a list of amazing, I think, challenges. And so then we need to look at what we can do as a church. And the Directory for Catechesis has a beautiful quote that I hope will bring some comfort to all of us. And it says, the church is called to set out with humility and boldness on the trail of God's presence and to look at our cities with a contemplative gaze. So look at everything that you said and try to use that contemplative gaze. A gaze of faith which sees God dwelling in their homes, in their streets and squares, becoming before the ambivalence and contradiction of social existence, that prophetic presence which is able to make itself heard on the questions and the values and principles of the kingdom of God. So how do we approach it? We really need to approach it with humility and boldness. I love those two suggestions. Humility, because we don't want to go in judgmental and the one that knows it all, but we need to do it with boldness that comes from the knowledge and the truth of our faith, the knowledge of God's love for ourselves and for all the people that He wants to show His face to. Definitely compassion, mercy, non-judgmental attitudes, bringing that hope to the people is what Pope Francis continues to call us and has called to through his most recent writings. Think about also Fratelli Tutti, the new document, to bring brothers and sisters to the people of our cities. So all the challenges that you expressed were very, very real. And of course, the charisma that needs to be proclaimed. And the directory, again, uses very particular adjective there. The proclamation needs to be transparent and humanizing and full of hope in comparison with the segregation, inhumanity, and violence that often emerges in the large urban context. So the proclamation is really of the gospel will be the basis for restoring the dignity of each and every human life in this context. For Jesus truly desire to give himself to the people of our cities. And if urban life can also, though, be a great opportunity for many, because it does open truly new perspective. It opens for fraternal sharing, it opens up for many relationships, it opens up for us to learn about ourselves in different ways. not rarely though becomes, as you often, as you said before, a place of extreme solitude for people, disappointment and also distrust. Some of you mentioned lack of trust within urban environments. And so this is truly an opportunity for us and an opportunity for presenting in a very creative manner a catechesis that is inspired by the catechumenate. So we go back again to the original catechumenate, because there is where the people that we encounter enter into relationship with the community. We need to be able to offer the other, that community context, where each and every person is valued. So again, the process of the catechumenate is very, very essential, because it puts others in touch, not only with ourselves, but really with a community of faith. And being embraced in a community, I think, allow people to experience the fulfillment of that amazing need, so human, of belonging. So how do we do that? Well, you mentioned when Michelle asked the question before, and how did you start it? Many of you started the Alpha program. So instead of doing massive, conferences, we move into a more personalized formation or catechesis or evangelization. We start meeting in the homes like the first Christians used to do, building relationship among the people and then sharing the gospel message with them. Faith study, a local cafe. We have done quite a few of them here in Vancouver. Alpha is not even done anymore in the parish hall, but we do it in little cafes, and we rent little places that speak more about home environment than an institutional environment. And obviously those are steps that are made to bring the people to the beauty of our Catholic faith within the doors of our churches. So the building of communities is important. Again, Pope Francis speaks about this in his last document on fraternal relationships. We're now moving very briefly into the context in the country. So maybe I will ask the same question. What are the challenges of proclaiming the gospel in the rural areas of our countries? If any of you is in the Northern Territories or in places that are outside of the cities, countryside.
Again, we're taking a moment to think.
Absolutely.
Similar responses: inability to gather, isolation, distance, lack of leaders, distance between faith community. Yeah, distance seems to be a prime concern. A lack of challenge is the lack of online technology in many rural locations, that the technology isn't available there. Physical distancing, not enough parishioners, as parishes have to unite to survive. The means of transportation for many. Communities can be very small with few financial resources. Resources are very scarce. There seems to be a common thread of geographical issues and transportation issues. Finding people willing to do catechesis. And again, the internet availability. Difficulty to get the status quo moving, resistance to change. Distance, lack of clergy, older population, not as willing to move and to get out. Isolation, fewer resources. It seems to be fairly consistent. Resistance to change is coming up a number of times.
Okay. Yeah.
Too few people ask to do too much. Judgmental, people being afraid to speak out of for fear of being ostracized in small communities. Again, the most aging communities, younger ones, moving to the cities.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Those are beautiful answers, and I They pictured truly a situation that we would find in the countryside. Don't you wish that we can bring the two together to give some of what the countryside experiences to the city and vice versa? It always reminds me of when we say that the church is both and, not either or, that our faith is both and not either or, that we really, as a community of faith, stand in the middle. There's so much goodness and so many lacks. And if we just can come into the middle, the rural context is very close to my heart because I grew up in the countryside. I grew up in a very small town outside of Assisi, Italy, 1,200 people. And in my elementary school, I think everybody was related to me. If I look into about 3 generations, we're all kind of connected. So a small environment. And it also, as I entered my Franciscan community, I came to know the community because I volunteered for the community in the US for a whole summer, and I worked on the land. So the land, to me, when I read the quotes that is given by the directory, the land is a space in which it is possible to have an experience of God, the place where he manifests himself. I find that very real in my own experience. I probably could say that I've come to an understanding of my religious call through the experience of God as manifested in my surrounding. And so you wish we could bring some of these experiences into the city, and of course to bring what the city has, the technology, and maybe the willingness to move and a little bit of the fast pace into the countryside. But here we find an amazing, I think, a reality that helps us to understand, if we are exposed to the cycles also of the liturgy. And so we could use what the land and what nature tells us to help others to learn about the liturgical season through the natural environments. This is a beautiful quote too: the cultivation of the land, caring for plants and animals, and the alteration of day and night, the passing of weeks, months, seasons are reminders to respect the rhythms of creation, to live in every day in a healthy and natural way, rediscovering time for ourselves and for God. So it does look like what is lacking in one of the environment is in the other. And maybe that our catechesis and our outreach to the people need to include bringing elements of the other context into the opposite. Again, the catechesis, the directory for catechesis says to approach it and to catechize with simplicity. And this is what I think is given to us when we experience the rural context, the simplicity and sobriety of lifestyle, a welcoming and solidarity in social relationship. The importance of the meaning of work. We work with our hands. Work is what allows us to participate in God's redemptive mission. And we find ourselves with lack of time, and we rush all the time. We move so fast. Work has become something that allows us to make money, to be able to buy more things and fill, our environment with many, many objects, instead of really realizing how work is a sacred opportunity for us to serve one another and to become who God wants us to be. And time for celebration and care for creation. And obviously the challenges of the lack of resources are major. And this calls us ever more, I think, strongly to help one another. And I find it beautifully here at the Archdiocese of Vancouver. I've been able to collaborate on and off with some of the Northern dioceses. And anytime I connect with someone, or I give a talk, or I pass on some of the information that I have, the office is always so willing for me to take time to work with them. The Archbishop and we as an Archdiocese realize that we have more resources than a very small diocese in the Northern Territories. And so it is our responsibility then to help in terms of resources. And and to share what we have. So it's important for us to do that. Then we look at the situation in traditional and local culture. So the tendencies of global culture to make everything uniform, and the intrusion of the mass media and the migration in search of better living conditions have also influenced the traditional culture. So I think all of us, most of us in Canada here, experience many different cultures, especially when we speak about the natives, or the First Nations, as they call them here. And so it's important, and many of these people have also accepted the faith, have entered our churches. And so the Directory for Catechesis calls us to really pay attention to local specificity and to cultural diversity. And how do we do that? There's a beautiful quote from St. John Paul II in his document, Novo Millennio Nuente, at the beginning of the term millennium, that says Christianity does not have simply one cultural expression. So the exposure to many different cultural expressions, even of the faith, needs to be met with great openness and not with judgment. When we go out, the Directory for Catechesis invites us not to go out in our own name or alone, but to go out in the name of the church, and often to go together as a community to bring Christ to others. To show immediately that we are motivated only by faith and not by interest or politics. The Directory invites us to express closeness above all with the infirm and the poorest and the children as we approach a different culture, especially the First Nations. And always to strive to get to know the Indigenous people, the Indigenous language, their ceremony, their customs, to show great respect for what they offer and the way that they manifest their lives and their faith. We move then, and this is going to be very quick, but it's a beautiful section in the Directory for Catechesis that speaks about popular piety, and also the visiting of shrines and the meaning of pilgrimages. I think most of you have probably experienced visiting beautiful churches and also going on pilgrimages. I'd like to speak a little bit about that. And of course, the popular pieties that are in need of supervision and purification in many circumstances, but they are truly a gift to the church, and they are truly also an opportunity and a mean of evangelization. But what a great mean of evangelization are our beautiful shrines throughout the world. And here in Canada too, I've seen many, many beautiful churches. And what a great opportunity of evangelization are pilgrimages. When we set on a pilgrimage, we leave and we never know who's coming back home, what happens to us on the journey. When we enter a shrine, we're exposed to the beauty of the Catholic faith, the beauty and the great gift of the creativity and the artistic makeup of so many men and women of our culture. Through the experience of a shrine or a pilgrimage, we take time to contemplate, to rest, to be in silence, especially during a time in our world today where life is so hectic. We're talking about how everything moves so fast. So both the experiences of pilgrimages and of shrine are a great opportunity of evangelization. Okay, I think I'll go continue on then. It's not Michelle's turn yet. So we're moving now to speak a little bit about the media. Okay, so in this past years, I will say, we have seen an increase of the use in the media throughout our world. I look around my desks right now and I wish I could take a picture, but it definitely looks like I have one computer, another screen, my phone, and then another keyboard on the side. We're constantly surrounded by media. And we're also very much, we live surrounded by a constant bombardment of news that often are very scientific. So the scientific knowledge has become truly predominant in our culture. The continual progress of science marks the contemporary culture. And how then in our faith can we reconcile the scientific knowledge with the reality of faith? So the church gives us, I think, a lot of help, has given us a lot of help throughout the years. It definitely tells us that evangelization needs to be attentive to the scientific advance and wishes to shed on them the light of faith and the natural law. And then when certain categories of reasons and of science are taken up into the proclamation of the message, these categories can become tools of evangelization. So you see, Fides and Ratio is one of the main documents that has been given to us by the Church through Saint Jean Paul II. But many times the Holy Fathers and many other theologians would speak into the relationship between faith and science, which today is probably, especially among the young population, one of the reasons why young people stay away from the church, because there seems to be in their mind, and also because of what they're being fed by the media, that there is not a connection between the two. Not only a lack of connection, but that faith and reason are clashing, that faith and science cannot go together. So we need to be ever more educated about technology and science to be able to counteract and to respond to that false statement. The potential of technologies are tremendous. The potentiality must be turned toward the improvement of living condition, of the progress of the human family. And the purpose of technology should be to serve the person. So the church accepts the anthropological challenges that stem from the progress of the sciences and makes them the subject of profound discernment. So again, another element that need to be discerned as we look into ways in which we evangelize and catechize. So the task of the catechist then, at this point, is always to take into account the influence that the scientific mentality exercises over people. How does the scientific mentality change our way of thinking, the way of thinking of the people whom we serve? And we need always to bring up questions and introduce themes such as the complexity of the universe and the creation, and the origin of life. We cannot shy away from discussing this very important topics that otherwise are going to be answered and have been answered by the media without really a context that is based within the faith. And also we will never, if we don't discuss it with our people, counteract that false statement of science clashing against the faith. This is a beautiful opportunity for us, and actually a great resource that Salt and Light put together. It's called the Creation Series that addresses a lot of the questions of science and faith. So I'd like to share it with you, and it's Deacon Pedro from Toronto and Sister Demi Marie, one of our sisters. So if you have never seen the series, please take some time to watch it yourself and use it with your people. It has a wonderful study guide with questions and reflections that you can use to kind of provide somewhat satisfying answers to the people. And then the social cultural context in relation to the digital culture. Well, there are kind of, I think our responses to digital has been a little bit different in this past 8 months. We found ourselves, because of COVID, in a situation where very quickly, if we were not part of the digital world, we had to jump in. And I experienced that myself. And one day for the other, we needed to be online. We needed to offer services that were virtual. We needed to reach out to the people that we couldn't reach out to in some way or another. And the digital has been very, very useful. Here we are across the country together today discussing the new directory for catechesis because of the great gift of technology. So the Holy Father wrote a document that you probably all have read or are familiar with. It's Christus Vivit. And he says that we live in a highly digitalized culture that has had a profound impact on ideas of time and space, on our self-understanding and understanding of others and the world, and our ability to communicate, to learn and be informed, and to enter into relationships with others. So we could shy away from this opportunity because we see the downfall of a highly cultural, digitalized world, or we could step in and try to make the best that we can and see it as an opportunity. There are many, many opportunities that we can see. And this is a beautiful picture of Carlo Acutis that was just canonized a little over a week ago, a young man that has he has died because of leukemia, a deep love for the Eucharist and the faith, and he created a whole web page and to promote the Eucharistic miracle. So the use of technology from a young man for the service of the church. So there are great opportunity for dialogue, for encounter and exchange between persons. We have an amazing opportunity to access information and knowledge, an extension and enrichment of human cognitive capacity. So the media give us a lot, though we see often that the digital environment is also very quickly becomes an environment where loneliness and manipulation, exploitation and violence, and even extreme cases of the dark web come to be very quickly. So we have our worries and and there are many dangers when we speak about the virtual world.
All right, so thank you, Sister Angela Marie. That was a great overview of those sections, and we are running out of time, so we're just going to kind of quickly go over the last few sections. I know someone commented about wanting to also hear about the ecumenism and religious pluralism section, so we're going to get to that in 1 second. So just to kind of tag on to the section of Sister Angela Marie, there are some questions on bioethics, and that's going to be an important section if you are looking in your ministry context at gender identity. This is raised here, and it's going to be important if you're in pastoral ministry in that point. So just refer to this section for that. Sorry, we can't spend a bit more time on it today, but this is for you to kind of take what's important for your setting and then to spend some time there and unpack it in your context. And of course, there's also an important light in this directory looking at environmental engagement. And really, it's new from the past directories, but it's not new for us because we've seen and been around since Laudato Si. So the directory speaks to environmental engagement and how this is an important concern for catechesis as well. So we're just going to move into, just wanted to show you where we were sitting. So we looked at the first two sections, and now we're going to come into the third section. We rearranged a little bit in terms of the actual layout of the directory, just so that we could kind of couple together with the presentation. But now we're going to look at ecumenism and religious pluralism. So it treats the ecumenical context, the ecumenical context, relation to Judaism, other religions, and new religious movements. Okay. And what I wanted to do was just, because there's so much to cover in this section, what I wanted to do was show how the directory orients these areas. And it starts by saying this: the phenomenon of human mobility for reasons both of study and work and escape from situations of violence or war has made possible the encounter of different peoples and new territories. So that's how it starts. And then it speaks to how the church is still committed, very much committed to the promotion of the unity of all disciples of Christ. And I wanted to share a story. So I've had some great time and experiences on the Anglican Roman Catholic Theological Dialogue of Canada. And there's one moment that stands out that I think captures what the directory is sort of, where it's orienting us. And so I was sitting around a meeting table and with the dialogue. So there's about 15, 20 members. And Archbishop Don Boland of Regina, he was the Catholic co-chair at the time. And if you don't know him, he's been involved with ecumenism and especially Anglican Roman Catholic relations for over 20 years. So he was the Catholic co-chair. And at this particular meeting, he brought with him a wooden cross. He laid it on the table and began to explain its significance. And he shared that in 2016, he had just gotten back from an international meeting in Rome with 19 Anglican and 19 Catholic bishops from across the world. And the bishops were told that Pope Francis would offer each of them a Lampedusa cross as a symbol of their being sent forth together. And no one had heard of a Lampedusa cross before. So there was a lot of question, well, what is this? And so during an evening prayer service with the bishops, they later learned that Lampedusa is an island off the southern coast of Sicily. And tragically, it's a place where many boats carrying refugees from North Africa have been shipwrecked as they sought a new life. And these small wooden boats, often carrying too many people and are ill-equipped for the voyage. And Archbishop Boland used the phrase, while these boats were first seen as vehicles of hope, they often became vehicles of death. And so this cross, you'll notice some blue ink on the one pictured here, and it's made from wood that washed up on the shore. It's a potent and tragic reminder of the lives caught in desperation and lost at sea. And when I held that waterlogged cross in my own hands, I was profoundly moved and quite honestly shaken. Not only did it make the migrant crisis heartachingly tangible, it renewed for me a perspective of ecumenism. So when the bishops received the cross in ecumenical pairs, they received a summons to work for justice, responding to the needs of refugees and working for systematic change so that millions of people do not need to flee their homes, and to do this work together. Now, while it certainly does not exclude it, ecumenism and interfaith dialogue goes beyond thinking where we agree or disagree theologically, or where we have grown apart in our ecclesial structures. We're encouraged to identify ways that we can come together, share a common mission, and go forth. And we must find ways to keep this an essential concern for formation in the faith and for our catechesis. And so if we do this, we of course will show that credible witness of our faith. So I hope that story sort of translates into what I think the document is pointing to. It starts in that tone, and I think this can be applied to the different areas where we see the religious pluralism or ecumenism today. And so some of the other things that we didn't get a chance to look over, but you'll see in the directory that are going to, of course, be
a lot of thank yous coming in, Michelle. Sister, yeah, a lot of thank yous. No questions yet.
Okay.
No, right now, just thanking you both for a beautiful presentation. And thanks to everyone for the entire series of presentations. God bless. It seems to be a lot of people that have enjoyed these sessions very much. We certainly have enjoyed putting them together. Yeah, there are no forms of questions come. Oh, will there be follow-up sessions? I think Mark's going to address that. Would love to see a webinar on bioethics. Thanks for today and the whole series. What a commitment from all of you. I think that's it, Mark. It's really a stream of thanks coming in.
Okay, thank you very much, David, and thank you, Michelle and Sister Angela Marie. What a rich section of the directory, which does bear more drawing out, and hopefully there will be opportunities to do that. The image of the tapestry with the beautiful colors, I think that Michelle started with, really illustrates for me that the diversity that exists within our particular churches, but we are united in our diversity when we recall that the goal of catechesis is intimacy with Christ, which comes about when we evangelize, accompany, and go forth together, whether as digital immigrants or digital natives. So thank you. As our time together comes to a close, we hope that you've been informed, formed, and transformed by the new orientations offered in the Directory for Catechesis. In turn, we also hope that this experience has equipped you to be able to share with others what you've learned, that has become a tipping point for renewed reflection and dialogue as you engage in pastoral planning in your local context. As evangelizing catechists, may we recognize that we are called to sometimes be the sage on the stage, but more often the guide and the side as we accompany others with mercy, compassion, all the while leading them to become missionary disciples. I'm deeply grateful to Sister Angela Marie, Michelle Dabrowski, David Daler, Ann Jameson, and Ann Walsh for sharing their incredible knowledge and insights with us, for telling stories and giving us images to help us apply our learning, for being wonderful companions on the journey. I thank you most sincerely, and I look forward to continued collaboration with each of you. And I invite the audience to join me in welcoming or in thanking everyone in whatever way it's possible to do that, given our circumstances. I also just finally want to thank you again, Bishop Crosby, for your presence with us, and all the bishops who have journeyed with us throughout this. We are most grateful and appreciative of your great support and ongoing support. So thank you. So long, everybody. It's been great. Bye-bye. God bless.